Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be talking about a pretty controversial topic. Um, have you ever wondered what happens when someone receives, like, one of the highest honors a country can bestow and is then later accused of maybe not living up to those standards?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Well, that's exactly what we're going to be looking at today with Sadhguru Jaggi Vasudev and his Padma Vibhushan Award.
Oh, wow. Okay, so the Padma Vibhushan. I mean, that's not just some, like participation trophy. It's a big deal. It's India's second highest civilian award.
Huge honor.
Yeah, like think Nobel Prize level recognition for people
Yeah.
who have made really incredible contributions to society.
Yeah, for sure. So when an opinion piece comes out and it's titled, Time to Revoke the Padma Vibhushan Award given to Sadhguru Jaggi Vasudev, well, you know it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
So that's the article that we're going to be looking at today and diving into. It's written by Praveen Ramachandra, and he lays out some pretty serious arguments against Sadhguru.
I see. So it's not just like a personal attack on Sadhguru.
Yeah, no, really.
It sounds like this Ramachandra is trying to use this as like a bigger thing, right?
So,
To ask some important questions about, what do these national honors even mean?
right.
Like, how do we even decide who deserves them?
Yeah.
And then what happens when it turns out that maybe someone wasn't who we thought they were?
Exactly.
Wow.
So let's jump into those arguments. So the first one that Ramachandra brings up is the environmental impact of the Isha Yoga Center that Sadhguru founded.
Okay.
Ramachandra is claiming that during its construction that there were some environmental regulations that were broken, and in particular that there was some building on protected forest land.
I see. So he's concerned about the environmental impact
Yeah.
of the center itself.
Yeah, and in the article, he actually uses this really powerful line. He says, "We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children."
That's a good one. It really makes you think, it's not just about, like building some buildings, right? It's about the long term. Like, what are we leaving for the next generation?
Yeah, it really makes you stop and think about your own choices, too.
Mhm.
Like, what compromises am I making today that could have, like, these really big consequences down the road?
Yeah, for sure.
And it's also interesting because this is a constant tension, especially in a country like India,
Right.
which is rapidly developing, but also has this incredible biodiversity. It's like, how do you balance the need to grow
Yeah.
with the need to protect the environment?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's a global problem, too. Every country is struggling with this, trying to balance those two things.
Exactly.
Economic growth and protecting our planet. It's not easy.
No, it's not. But what Ramachandra is saying is that in this case with the Isha Yoga Center, that the scales were tipped too far in the wrong direction.
Interesting. So what's next?
All right, so his next argument gets a little bit heated.
Okay.
It's about what Ramachandra calls pseudoscience being promoted by Sadhguru. Basically, Sadhguru is making some claims that go against what science has already proven.
Uh-oh. So we're not just talking about like, different interpretations or opinions. We're talking about stuff that like contradicts like actual evidence.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm interested to hear more.
So, for example, Sadhguru has made these statements about how water has a memory.
Water having memory? What does that even mean?
Yeah, I don't know. It's not scientifically supported.
Interesting. Okay.
And then he's also talked about the dangers of eclipses, which is, kind of perpetuating those baseless fears that people have.
I see. Yeah.
And actually, in the article, Ramachandra brings in this quote by the physicist Richard Feynman, who said, "I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned."
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, it really gets at the heart of what the scientific method is about.
Yeah, it's all about questioning, right? Testing things, being open to being wrong.
Exactly. But this is why this is so important, especially when you have someone with as much influence as Sadhguru. Misinformation can spread so quickly.
For sure. And when that happens, people start to lose trust in real science.
Exactly.
And that can have really bad consequences in the real world. Think about things like, people not wanting to get vaccinated or not believing in climate change.
Yeah.
So it's really about, how do we as a society decide what's true?
Right.
And then once we figure that out, how do we use that knowledge to make good decisions?
It's a big question. It really makes you think, haven't you ever come across, like a belief or a practice that just didn't seem to line up with the facts?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Yeah, me too. How do you navigate that?
Yeah.
Especially in today's world where there's so much information coming at us from all directions.
Yeah, it can be really hard to sort through it all.
It is.
So what else does this Ramachandra guy have to say? I'm hooked. Well, Ramachandra doesn't stop there. His next point is where things get a little bit more serious. He starts talking about potential human rights violations and some shady legal stuff happening within the Isha Foundation.
Oh, wow. So now we're talking about some really heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Like, there are reports of volunteers basically working in conditions that are pretty exploitative. Maybe not getting paid fairly or having decent living conditions.
That's not good.
Not at all. And there are also some concerns about how they acquired the land for the center.
Like maybe they didn't follow the rules.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like there are laws in place to protect local communities and their land rights.
Yeah.
And it seems like there might be some violations there.
I see.
And this is where Ramachandra brings in this quote, "Justice delayed is justice denied."
Ooh, yeah, powerful stuff. It really emphasizes that these issues need to be addressed, like now,
Yeah.
and that people need to be held accountable.
Exactly. That's a tough pill to swallow. But it's a reminder that even organizations that promote these really high-minded spiritual ideas, they're not above these very real, very human problems.
Yeah, that's true.
It really makes you think about the power dynamics at play.
Especially in these spiritual groups where followers tend to really trust their leaders, sometimes even blindly.
Yeah, you're right. And it makes you wonder, how can we make sure that these vulnerable people are protected?
Right.
How do we make sure that their rights are respected?
Even in these groups that can feel kind of closed off from the outside world.
Exactly. It's a hard question.
Yeah.
And it makes us think about our own role in all of this.
Like, what can we as individuals do to be more aware?
Yeah. How can we support organizations that are transparent and hold themselves accountable?
Especially when they have so much spiritual authority.
It's a big question, right?
Right.
Because sometimes our faith can blind us to what's really going on.
That's true. We don't want to ignore the warning signs.
Exactly. So moving on. Ramachandra's next argument is where things get pretty interesting. He starts talking about how some people might be exploiting others within these spiritual communities.
Oh, wow.
He's suggesting that Sadhguru might be using his influence and his position to get people to spend money on programs and courses
Okay.
that might not actually be as beneficial as they're claiming.
I see. So it's like walking that line between genuine spirituality and manipulation.
Right. Because think about it. People often turn to spirituality when they're going through a tough time in their lives.
Yeah, when they're searching for answers or meaning or connection.
Right. And that vulnerability can make them susceptible to people who might take advantage of them.
Yeah, you're right.
And here Ramachandra brings in a quote from George Bernard Shaw. He says, "Beware of false knowledge. It is more dangerous than ignorance."
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, because it reminds us that not all information is created equal.
Right.
And even if we have good intentions, we can still be misled.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder if it's even worse when someone is intentionally misleading you for their own profit.
Exactly. So it really comes down to this question of how can we tell the difference between real spiritual guidance and something that's more focused on making money.
Right.
It's a skill that we all need to learn, especially in the world we live in today.
Yeah, for sure. So what else does Ramachandra have to say?
Okay, well, this next point is all about India's secularism.
Okay, interesting.
So India is a country that prides itself on being secular and on encouraging critical thinking.
Right.
But Ramachandra is arguing that Sadhguru, by pushing these faith-based beliefs over evidence, might be undermining that balance.
I see. Because he's basically saying, just believe what I say, don't worry about the facts.
Right. And to illustrate this point, he uses this really strong quote by Voltaire. He says, "Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities."
Wow, that's intense. So he's basically saying that unchecked dogma can be really dangerous.
Exactly. And it highlights how important it is to keep a space for reason and critical inquiry, even within a faith.
Yeah, because we all have a responsibility, right?
Yeah.
Especially those who have a platform and can influence a lot of people.
Exactly. And it begs the question, how do we deal with these different worldviews, these contrasting ways of knowing what's true,
It's a tough one.
while still holding on to values like tolerance and critical thinking?
Right, because we can't let those differences turn into division and conflict.
Exactly. And now we get to Ramachandra's final argument.
Okay, hit me.
So he basically circles back to the idea of national honors.
Okay.
And he says that if someone like Sadhguru, who has received the Padma Vibhushan, has all these controversies surrounding him, it ends up making the award itself look bad.
Oh, I see. It's like it cheapens it somehow.
Exactly. Because these honors aren't just about individual achievements. They're about what we as a country stand for.
Right. The values we hold dear, the qualities that we admire.
And Ramachandra is emphasizing that these awards should represent the very best of us.
So the highest ethical standards.
Exactly. And he reminds us that a nation's greatness is measured by how it treats its weakest members.
Powerful words.
Yeah. So it all comes down to this question of how do we decide who is worthy of these national honors?
Right. And then what do we do when someone doesn't live up to those standards?
Big questions. And it brings us right back to the heart of our deep dive today. What happens when the people we look up to, the people we give our highest awards, to maybe fall short of what we expect of them?
Yeah, it really makes you think about our own responsibility, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Like to question things, to dig a little deeper, and to not just, blindly accept things just because someone in a position of authority said it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have to be informed citizens.
Right, not just followers. We have to think critically about the information we're getting, evaluate it, and hold our leaders accountable. And that goes for, spiritual leaders, but also politicians and even, just organizations that we're a part of.
You're absolutely right. And it feels like this article by Ramachandra is almost like a case study, a microcosm of all these bigger issues that we all face in the world. We're talking about the environment, right?
Yeah.
Science versus misinformation, ethical leadership, the power dynamics within communities. And ultimately, what we value as a society and how we actually uphold those values.
And what I find really interesting is this whole question of national honors.
Yeah.
They're supposed to be more than just a pat on the back, right? They're supposed to inspire us, set a standard for what excellence and integrity look like. But what happens when that trust is broken? What message does that send?
Yeah. It's a tough one. I don't think there's an easy answer. But it's definitely a conversation that we need to have. And Ramachandra's piece has definitely started that conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing. It's making us confront these uncomfortable truths.
Yeah, you're right.
And examine our own beliefs and assumptions.
It's a good reminder that we're all part of this, ongoing search for truth and meaning. And that the choices that we make, the questions that we ask, and the stands that we take, they all matter. They all shape the world around us.
Absolutely. Well, this has been quite a journey from the forests of India to, the highest levels of national recognition. This deep dive has covered a lot of ground. But that's what we do, right?
That's what we're here for.
We explore these complex topics, we unpack the arguments, and hopefully we leave you with more questions than answers.
Because those questions, they keep us learning, they keep us growing, and hopefully they make us better citizens.
They do. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final thought. What are the qualities that you really value in a leader? What standards do you think should be upheld by the people who receive these national awards? And what can you do in your own life to create a society that actually honors those values and holds its heroes accountable?
Good questions. Keep those in mind as you go about your day.
Absolutely.
Who knows, maybe you'll discover some answers of your own along the way.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep the conversation going.